all this type of stuff. But what's the thing that you find hard for you to kind of cross people over the hump with?
Works.
Mm.
Works, because it's become the ultimate four-letter word in grace circles. Like if you tell people, if you mention anything that they ought to do, now
Mm.
that they know Christ, there's a bristling that happens in a lot of people. And some of that bristling is like a PTSD from their Christianity they came up in that was
Right.
always work, works, works. You got to work to go to heaven. You got to work to please God. You got to work to stay in favor. I get it. I get it. If that's the only way you ever heard Christian works was attached to performance or backsliding or going to hell, well, I get it then. Someone comes in and says, we ought to be doing this. And you go, whoa, I don't want to hear what I ought to do. I'm sick of that. But I have found that that's a tough hurdle. A lot of people have struggled with hearing anything they ought to do now that they've come to Christ,
Mm.
and they've had a revelation of the new covenant, because they have trouble laying that mentality down. I believe that we were created for good works. Part of who we are is to live out the love of Christ on the earth to our neighbor. And that is a work. It is not a work to be saved. It is a work from my salvation. And that to me has been a huge hurdle of people who just don't, they, because they're afraid of anything they can do. They've Some have even pushed off. They don't want to hear too much about reading their Bible.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to hear too much about prayer. They don't want to hear too much about going to church, because boy, it's starting to sound like works. Starting to sound like you're wanting me to work my way to heaven. I don't want
Yeah.
you to work your way to heaven. I just want you to understand the value in knowing the
Right.
word, and the value in praying, and the value in communing with your brothers and your sisters, and how that is a part of what you are in, because this is a communal faith.
Right.
Um, we don't just get to do Christianity any way we want.
Mm.
Christianity is a received faith. Okay?
Yeah.
It is a
Expound. Yeah.
received faith starting with Christ. So pay attention to whatever Jesus handed out,
Right.
whether it's his body or his blood or it's his instruction. And from there, watch how the church for 20 centuries has handled it. It's been well vetted. Like, you're not in this alone. You're not some newbie who just came up with this great theory and now it's time to start go living it out. And so
Mm-hmm.
Christianity is a shared faith, a received faith, and we
Oh,
ought
I
to
should
pay
take it.
attention to the things that have been passed down to us.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean that we are obliged to all of them or
Right.
bound to all of them. But it does mean that we should pay attention to them,
Mm.
and don't kick out so easily everything you've ever known. You might burn a bridge you need.
Right.
And so, but I've really had to go to work on that word works and ought to.